Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a Coca-Cola cake, and this is what it looks like. This is a chocolate cake. It's very moist, fudgy, and of course it contains Coke. And then we have a frosting, which again contains Coke, nice chocolate frosting, and then some pecans on top. So the first thing you need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And we're going to use a 9 by 13 inch baking pan. That's 23 by 33 centimeters. And you can just butter the inside of your pan, or I'm just going to use one of these non-stick sprays. And spray both the bottom and the sides. Don't want it sticking. And then, as you can see, we're not using an electric stand mixer for this. We're just going to make it all by hand. The first thing we need to do is to melt some butter. So you will need a medium-sized saucepan, and you will need half a cup, 113 grams of butter. And I use unsalted butter. You could use salted if you prefer. And I've just cut it into smaller pieces so it melts a little faster. And then just going to put it over medium heat and melt the butter. Now, this is a southern cake. It actually is very popular in Georgia, where I live. Probably because, one, this is Atlanta is the headquarters of the Coca-Cola Company, and we also grow a lot of pecans here. And of course, southern cakes tend to be a little sweet. Just keep that in mind. We like our sugar. I'm just going to melt this. Okay, so our butter is almost melted. So now what I'm going to add, this is a chocolate cake, and what we're going to add is unsweetened cocoa powder, a half a cup, which is 50 grams. I'm actually using the natural cocoa powder, which means it's not Dutch processed. And then just kind of whisk that in. And then we're going to add a little oil, a half a cup, 120 grams of a flavorless oil. Now that you could use a canola, a corn, a vegetable, safflower, or even a light olive oil here. Just whisk that in. And our last ingredient, of course, Coca-Cola cake, we need Coke. So I am adding 1 cup, which is about 255 grams of Coke. And this is a regular Coke. And then I'm just going to whisk this just until it comes to a boil. That'll dissolve all our cocoa powder, mix everything together. So watch carefully. Okay, so up to a boil. So I'm just going to remove from the heat, plug that. And so now I'm just going to let that cool just a little. So while that is cooling down, you want to put 1 3/4 cups, which is 230 grams of an all-purpose flour, or you may know that as a plain flour. And to that, I'm going to add 1 1/2 cups, which is 350 grams of granulated white sugar. Like I said, sweet. Actually, that is 1 3/4 cups, sorry, which is 350 grams. And then I'm just going to whisk that together. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, which is 5 grams of baking soda, and a half a teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. I use a kosher salt, but you could use like a table salt or a sea salt. I'm going to just whisk that together, and then I'm going to kind of just give it a little bit of a well in the center so I can put our wet ingredients. And then in a small bowl here, I have 2 large eggs. That is 110 grams without the shell. And have your eggs at room temperature. And I'm just going to whisk those up, break them up a bit. And then for flavoring, I'm adding 1 1/2 teaspoons, 6 grams of a pure vanilla extract. And I'm also going to whisk in a half a cup, which is about 130 grams of buttermilk. I'm using a commercially made buttermilk. You could use You can also buy like a buttermilk powder. You could use that. Or what you can do is make like a really good substitute. So take a half a cup, about 120 grams of milk. Stir in a half a tablespoon of either lemon juice or vinegar. Let that stand at room temperature for 10 minutes. And you know, it's just as good as commercial buttermilk in this case here. So, not to worry if you can't find it at the store. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to just move this out of the way. I'm going to pour in. You may say, why did I like dissolve the cocoa powder in a liquid? And actually when you do that, you melt it, it really intensifies the flavor of the cocoa powder. So we're going to have a really nice chocolate flavored cake. So there we go. And this is still quite warm, which will dissolve our sugar. So just whisk carefully here. I don't want to slop. Kind of like, reminds me of making a brownie batter. As you can see, it's smoothing out very nicely. That sugar's melting, becoming shiny. Okay, oh, and they look gorgeous. I can just smell the cocoa powder. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is gradually add this into our batter. Mix that in. See, a very simple cake to make, and it, you know, it makes a large. I find, you know, this could you could serve probably at least around 20 people because, like I said, it is a sweet cake, so I tend to serve it in small pieces. So if you have a large gathering, but you know what, this stores really well, so great cake to have on hand. Yes, make sure I get the last out of that bowl. And we're done. Okay. Let's pour it into our pan. So now, as always, everyone's oven is a little different. I find it's somewhere between 28 and 30 minutes. You know, it's always best to check a few minutes before the stated baking time, before the end of that, just to make sure, because we don't want to over bake our cake. We want nice and moist, so you want to bake it until a toothpick inserted into the center just comes out clean. So just kind of there. So somewhere between 28 and 30 minutes. Okay, our Coca-Cola cake is now done. See, nice risen toothpick inserted into the center, just comes out clean. And it also starts to pull away from the sides of the pan. That's another way to know it is done. So now, I'm just gonna let that cool a bit, and we're gonna make the frosting, because what we're gonna do is actually put the frosting on the cake will still be really warm. And that way, frosting kind of soaks into the cake, makes it really nice and moist. So in a medium-sized saucepan, we're going to do it kind of like we did with the cake batter. We're going to take a half a cup of butter, which is 113 grams, and just put that in there. And again, I'm going to put it over medium heat and just melt our butter. Okay, so my butter is almost melted, so we are making a chocolate frosting. So again, I'm going to add some unsweetened cocoa powder. You can use either the regular unsweetened or natural, but I'm using Dutch processed here. So 1/4 cup 25 grams. And stir that in. And again, we're going to add some Coca-Cola. I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup, which is about 80 grams of Coke. And we're just going to bring that up to a boil over medium heat. Almost there. You will need 3 cups, which is 345 grams of confectioner sugar. I'll just take that off the heat, also known as powdered sugar or icing sugar. And we do want to sift that. I'm just using like a strainer because we want to get rid of any lumps. You can have that done ahead of time, because what we want to do right away is we want to whisk our hot mixture into our sugar, and that will melt our sugar. And then you will also, for flavoring, I like to add 1½ teaspoons, 6 grams of pure vanilla extract. Okay, there we go. And whisk that till it's nice and smooth. If yours, depending on the type, whether you use the regular unsweetened or the Dutch process, your frosting may look a little different in color, and it also depends on the brand you use. I find the Dutch process gives you that really nice dark color, and you can see our frosting's nice and shiny. So now what we're going to do is right away we're going to pour that over our cake. Is still nice and hot. Now, like I like to do, I don't really like to spread this with a spoon or anything, because I want to keep it nice and shiny. So just move as you're pouring, just gradually pour it so it kind of runs over the surface of the cake. Because if you have to spread it too much with a spoon or an offset spatula, then it kind of dulls. And I like it nice and shiny, as you can see. And that frosting, because the frosting's still warm and our cake is hot, so it is going to soak into the cake a bit, which really makes it good. It makes it nice and moist and fudgy tasting. Okay, so I'm just gonna shake it a little there. So as you can see, isn't that beautiful? And now, finishing touch, we need our pecans. So I'm using about 3/4 of a cup, which is about 75 grams of coarsely chopped pecans. Now I did toast these first, and really easy to do. Just put them on a baking sheet in a 350 degree Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius oven for about 6-8 minutes, just until they're lightly brown. You can start to smell them, and then just coarsely chop them. Of course, you don't have to use pecans. You could use walnuts as a good choice, or almonds, or I think you could even use peanuts. We grow peanuts too in the state of Georgia. So you could do that. So, and there is our cake. Isn't that? I mean, it is a nice cake. I call it a snacking cake. So, if you want to put lots, there we go. And that is our cake. Now, you want to, of course, let it cool completely before serving. But actually, I like to make this the day before I'm going to serve it. I find it needs that overnight to kind of the flavors to mingle, and then the cake becomes really nice and moist, but kind of fudgy. So, and which is great, because if you're having a gathering, you can make it the day before, and then you don't have to fuss on the day that everybody's coming over. So anyway, and you can store this cake at room temperature, probably 4 to 5 days, a little longer if you put it in the fridge. So it is great cake to have on hand. Now, because I like this cake to sit overnight, I'm going to try, I made this yesterday, so I'm going to try this one. So, as you can see, you got the cake, frosting, pecans. Very nice. The other thing is, as you could tell, this is a sweet cake. We put a lot of sugar, we put the Coca-Cola. And I find even letting it sit overnight, that sweetness softens. So you have a really moist, nice chocolatey cake that's a little fudgy. And then the frosting is very nice with the cocoa powder. And I like the Dutch processed cocoa powder in it, but either one. And then, of course, the crunch and the kind of light, the caramel flavor of the pecans. Kind of all mingles together, and you have a very nice cake. So try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.